everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. There are so many benefits and advantages to living out in the country, but one drawback, especially as this school year gets underway, is consistent access to high-speed internet for remote learning. SUNUP's Curtis Hare picks up our story in Pawnee County.
The day before the start of a new school year can be stressful. But in a pandemic, the rough waters Oklahoma educators are setting sail on are definitely uncharted.
Our community itself, we've had cases, but we're not seeing the spikes that some of the larger areas do. And part of that, I think, is because we are so rural that we're a little bit separated from some of those issues.
Stacy Womack is the superintendent of Pawnee Schools. Although COVID cases are low and her school district is as prepared as it can be for in-person classes, she knows all that could change to distance learning. Virtual learning has its challenges, but for areas like Pawnee County, it's even more difficult and nearly impossible for some families.
Internet access in those areas, incredibly limited. We tried multiple hotspots over the summer, trying to figure out what could we provide to those families that are in those locations. Nothing. We have areas that no hotspot provided any type of internet connection for those areas. And it's a significant number of kids. We're not talking one or two families, we're talking significant numbers of families.
For rural communities, direct fixed access to high-speed internet, or broadband, is either lacking or non-existent, and the coronavirus pandemic is compounding the issue. Many families rely on cellular services to set up hotspots for connectivity. But even in 2020, cell service is not always a given in these areas.
Yeah, I think people that more in the urban areas take for granted their internet access, and they don't realize we're still struggling with internet access out here in the rural areas, having it available or having it fast enough.
For Pawnee County Extension educator Rick Clovis and Extension Director Trinity Brown, it took a pandemic to reveal the lack of broadband or hotspot availability in their area.
When the pandemic started and we had to start working from home, we started to realize the issues that we had with internet.
I mean, we keep a landline in our house because even our cell phone, half the calls are going to get dropped or they're going to be cutting in and out.
I don't have internet at my home, so I was having to hotspot off of my phone, and then having a child that was home from college and she was trying to do her day classes as well, and we struggled with that.
Cellular connection, most of the networks that we are dealing with, we actually have a really good signal here. The FCC actually says that about 98% of everyone has access to broadband, but if you look at the rural versus urban split, it's pretty significant, and in Oklahoma, it's a lot worse.
Brian Whitaker is a rural development specialist for Oklahoma State University Extension. He says only about 61% of Oklahomans in rural communities have broadband access. As this map shows, counties in dark brown have at least 75% of the population going without high-speed internet, and Pawnee County is one of them.
Everyday life is absolutely affected by not having good broadband connection. So if you think about everything you do on a day-to-day basis, you search for a restaurant online, you file a job application online, you do your banking online. It's actually been shown to affect where businesses are going to put new locations.
Limited to no internet is just another issue both rural Oklahoma and rural America face. But it's an issue that hasn't gone unnoticed. Recently, the state Senate appointed Dr. Whitaker to the new Rural Broadband Expansion Council, a group specifically organized to solve this issue.
So, I really appreciate that the legislature is looking into this and realizes that this is an issue. And we actually just had our first meeting 2 days ago for the Rural Broadband Expansion Council, so we're still kind of laying the groundwork.
Access is the main problem for rural areas, but it's not so much physical accessibility as it is affordability.
We might have internet, but there's families out there that just can't afford it. And that's a big challenge, not even during this pandemic, but just everyday life.
The number one reason why a lot of households don't have internet access at home is not because there's not a line running by their house, it's because they can't afford $60, $70, $80 a month for this connection. Low-income households realize the importance of a broadband connection. They know just how disadvantaged they are when they can't have one.
For Stacy, she's confident her schools can adapt to whatever happens. Using CARES funding, her district bought additional Chromebooks and set up hotspots in the school parking lots in the event of a closure. Whatever it takes to make sure her students and their families know they matter.
Even though we're rural, our kids deserve the same education. So I don't want them to look at having a rural education as being a hindrance, but rather something that provides them not only with the tools they need, but additional tools such as that sense of family and belonging that I feel like only comes in a rural district.
In Pawnee County, I'm Curtis Hare.
Things are starting to seem like it's drying out, but Josh, it's really not drought stress that producers are seeing. It's just getting a little bit hot.
Yeah, we're going from 80s to 90s a couple weeks ago to where we're back in the mid to high 90s. We are getting a little dry on the surface, so those growers that are looking to plant wheat, it's a little drier. But a lot of our summer crops already have some deep roots, so a lot of the stress we're seeing is a lot to do with some really thick heat. It's really tough when the wind starts blowing and the heat's really high on some of these crops. Our late planted or our double crop like we have immediately behind us, we're just going through some of those real sensitive stages right now. And so the heat and any moisture that seems to be stressing the crop is really taking a hit on it right now.
So for the crops that were planted earlier in the season, the summer crops, and it's starting to be harvest time for those, what's harvest looking like for those crops?
Yeah, so we're starting to see growers start picking corn. We're starting to see the really early stages of grain sorghum come out. The good thing is if we're getting a combine through them right now, some of those crops that we're getting a combine through look pretty good. Unfortunately, with harvest, with combine also comes, we're starting to see a lot with the chopper. We're starting to see some of those crops that were summer crops get a little bit stressed on in through early part of August, and they're getting taken out of the field, but they're getting taken out of the field as forage. So the stuff that's going out with the combine looks pretty good. Some of the early corn looks pretty good. Haven't really heard much on the milo, but the good thing is some of the aphids are building in some of our areas that the milo is, and so the quicker we can get it out of the field and into the bin, the better off we're going to be there.
Last time we spoke, you were really concerned with earworm and corn. How did that situation, unfold?
Yeah, we still have where the worm damage was heavy in corn. It's really heavy, and that's quite evident. We're starting to see a lot of the decreased grain formation in the tips of the cobs. Those worms have since now moved into sorghum and soybean, and we're starting to see, especially in that north central district, starting to see a lot of growers give calls on some worms, some pod worms eating on the pods, eating on the sorghum heads. So it is an issue that we've seen extend out of corn. And it's one thing that is growing, but a lot of our insect pressure is growing right now.
So we're hitting that final stretch of the season for summer crops. What are some things that need to happen to ensure that a good crop for Oklahoma producers?
Well, when we talk this late part of the season, I'll stick to like soybeans and sorghum. This when we're starting to see a lot of worms come around in our soybean. A lot of stink bugs are starting to show up. And then in our sorghum, like I said, the aphids are starting to build a little bit, and also with the worm pressure. So growers need to get out and make sure that these last couple of stages, a lot of the sorghum that looks really good is still a couple of weeks off. And so we need to make sure that we're taking care of those, because things like sugarcane aphids still being a couple weeks from maturity can still get a yield hit for it. Also a harvest efficiency hit with those aphids starting to build up. So make sure you're getting out there, taking care of bugs. And then the one big thing that I always stress growers when we go into the fallow season or after harvest, look at your weed management plan, because that managing those weeds as we're going into the winter, if you're fallowing the winter, is ultimately important to that next summer crop. So getting out there, taking those last couple precautions with some of our pests is going to be pretty critical, I think, for years to come.
All righty, Josh. Josh Lofton, Cropping System Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Here we are towards the end of August. the time when we would expect some of those early calves that are supposed to start around the 1st of September. A few of those early ones are already showing up. That means to me that it's time to review the 3 stages of parturition, or the 3 stages of calving, that are going to take place when a normal birth actually occurs. Stage 1 of parturition takes place, and the research is variable on the length of time of stage 1, anywhere from as short as 4 hours to as long as 24 hours. The key thing that's happening during stage 1 is, due to the hormonal changes in the cow, there will be relaxation or dilation of the cervix. That's hard for us to see. It's certainly something that, unless we're actually examining the cow, we won't notice. What we can notice, though, due to that same hormonal change, is some relaxation of the pelvic ligaments right around the tail head of the cow or the heifer. If you're watching closely, as they get into that stage 1 within the last 24 hours before calving, you'll see a bit of a sunken appearance right around the tail head. A good clue to watch for as you're watching cows and heifers at the start of the calving season. The other things, of course, that happen in stage 1 is the behavioral changes that we sometimes see, and that is, of course, the cow or heifer that separates herself from the rest of the herd, perhaps even kicks at her stomach, twitches her tail, acts uncomfortable, may lay down, get up, just act a little bit abnormal. And again, that's a part of stage 1. Now, stage 2 is where all the real action is. Stage 2 we define as when we first see the appearance of a water bag. And a lot of times we miss that one unless we're watching cows constantly, or the appearance of the baby calf's feet. That's when stage 2 begins. Stage 2 ends when the calf is actually completely delivered on the ground. Those that are having their first babies as 2-year-olds, the length of time of stage 2 should be around 1 hour. If it's going much beyond that, perhaps there's something going wrong and she needs some help. In the case of the older cow, the one that's had calves before, she's already stretched all those ligaments. The average time that she is going to have that calf from the appearance of the water bag until complete delivery is only about a half an hour. Stage 3 is the cleaning of the cow, the releasing of the afterbirth, the placenta, and this particular situation generally occurs within about the first 8 hours after calving. If it doesn't, then we have what's commonly called a retained placenta. And that can require some managerial help as well. We really advise against the concept of getting that cow up that's got a retained placenta and manually pulling it loose, because we can do more damage to the uterine wall and perhaps make that cow to where she's infertile, incapable of having calves in the future. If she's not cleaning within about that first day, then call your local veterinarian and get some advice as to how to treat that retained placenta, and you can do that to where we end up with a healthy cow that'll go on to be productive in next year and future years. When we see something that doesn't fit into those 3 categories and the time frame involved, then we know that we probably need to provide an assistance in order to make sure we've got a healthy calf and a healthy cow after the calving season. We look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Well, it's hard to believe we're already in that time of year where we're talking about OQBN sales, and that's just really not that far off, is it, Paul?
Yes, it's getting real close. The initial wean dates for a lot of our sales we're right up against those coming up in September. So, you know, with the minimum weaning time of 45 days for that program, it's fast approaching and it's time to start getting ready for weaning time.
You know, you mentioned the 45 days, you know, just kind of quickly going over some of the OQBN stipulations, you know, wean cattle for 45 days, and what other things that people need to know?
So the Oklahoma Quality Beef Network is a certified preconditioned program where the cattle need to be weaned for 45 days, The bulls need to be castrated and healed, and anything with horns need to be dehorned and healed by the time of the sale. We also prefer the cattle be dewormed and bunk broke to learn how to eat from a feed bunk and different water sources.
Do you actually have some information in regards to last year's OKBN sales and why those programs, or why this program is such a great benefit to producers?
So what we saw last year is we had right at 6,000 cattle enrolled in the program. The premium on the average across both bulls or steers and heifers and across weight ranges was right at $12 per 100 pounds. On the average body weight of our cattle, that was right at $150 worth of benefit to the producer. And for those 6,000 cattle, that's about $900,000 in impact economically to the beef cattle industry. We've looked back at a lot of our stocker cattle research where we've received cattle and then ran them through on wheat pasture on summer grass. And we found that if we can have healthy cattle and not have to treat them for bovine respiratory disease, our performance during the receiving period will be much greater, right at 2.5 pounds a day is what we saw. And our gains during the stocker period or the grazing period will also increase. Whenever we pull those cattle one time, we will decrease the performance, or if we have to treat them one time, we'll decrease their performance during the receiving period. We may not decrease their performance while grazing because we caught them early enough, but it's those cattle that we have to pull and treat 2 or 3 times, we really see a huge decrease in performance during preconditioning, and that carries over into the grazing phase. So, you know, with preconditioning, we can cut first pull to respiratory disease by about 70%, and we can cut our second treats by over 90%. So big benefits to the people buying those cattle.
All right, thanks, Paul. Paul Beck, Extension Beef Cattle Specialist here at Oklahoma State University. And if you'd like some more information about upcoming OQBN sale dates, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Hi, Wes Lee with the weekly Mesonet Weather Report. For most of the past week, little rainfall fell, but by midweek, the far southeast was starting to see the early impacts of the massive Hurricane Laura in the Gulf. The 7-day rainfall map from Wednesday afternoon shows only trace amounts of rain in all but the southeastern counties, which was led by over 5 inches in Broken Bow. These generous amounts all fell on Wednesday as the storm was nearing landfall. Additional rains and flooding in the area are expected by week's end. Unfortunately, little to no rain came to quench the drought-stricken soils of western Oklahoma. The 10-inch fractional water index map for Wednesday afternoon shows numbers in the brown areas reaching down mostly to 0.1s and 2s. The lowest level on the index would be 0. Regardless of the lack of rainfall, plants and water bodies continue to lose water to the atmosphere. This evapotranspiration table is from our Elk City site in Roger Mills County. It shows that where crops had plenty of soil moisture available, they would use around 1/4 to 1/3 of an inch of moisture per day depending on height. Ponds, lakes, and stock tank evaporation can be estimated by looking at pan evaporation. Here we see it takes about 3 days to lose an inch of water with current conditions. Now here's Gary with more on the drought in the West.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, this is really the first week we haven't seen a lot of rainfall across the state, so unfortunately, no drought improvements for this week. And actually, we've had some drought intensification. So let's get straight to the new drought monitor map and see where we're at. Well, unfortunately, you can see that area down in southwestern Oklahoma. Those red colors indicate extreme drought. We haven't seen that extreme drought across that part of the state for a while. We had seen it up in the Panhandle and parts of north central and central Oklahoma, but now it's starting to enter from the southwestern parts of the state up into west central Oklahoma. And surrounding that area, we have that larger area of brown severe drought And then, of course, the lighter tan is moderate drought. Let's take a look at the Mesonet 90-day rainfall maps, and we can see where those problem areas are really starting to show up. Look at Altus down in far southwest Oklahoma, only 2.7 inches of rain through the last 90 days. That's through the bulk of the summer months. That's a lot of rainfall to miss if you're down in the southwestern parts of the state. And we see those similar types of amounts scattered across the southwestern quarter of the state. A little bit more, from 5 to 8 inches in some areas, but for most people, less than 5 inches, and for some, less than 4 inches. The outlook for next week's precipitation chances from the Climate Prediction Center do show increased odds of above normal precipitation across nearly the entire state, but especially the northeastern quarter. We would like to see those greater odds down across the southwestern parts of the state, but hopefully that can shift down there in the near future. So hopefully we're going to start coming out of this dry pattern we've been in for the last couple of weeks, start to get some rainfall, and especially down across the southwestern parts of the state and other parts of western Oklahoma where those deficits are really starting to mount. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, joins us now. Kim, let's start with an overview this week of crop prices, beginning with wheat.
Well, it's been a good couple of weeks for crop prices. You look at wheat, the current price is around $4.10. That's up about 30 cents from $3.80 a couple of weeks ago. You can forward contract wheat for harvest 21 delivery at $4.45. That Kansas City contract, it broke the $4.50 resistance level. I think that was a pretty strong level to break. I believe the target is about $4.75. That's up about another 20 cents.
What is happening in the market to cause this bump for wheat?
Well, China's been coming in the market buying some wheat. I think there's some expectations that they'll continue to do so. I think the market understands what the northern hemisphere wheat crop's going to be like, how much wheat's in the Black Sea area, and how that's going to be distributed. Also, the producers in the Black Sea area, they've got storage now. They're not selling everything at harvest, and so the market's having to bid that wheat out of storage, and that raises our price too.
Let's switch gears now and look at corn and milo. What's happening there?
Well, on the corn, the forward contract price is about $3.30. That price is 26 cents, or the basis is 26 cents under that December contract. We're up 30 cents for corn. That December contract broke that $3.45 resistance level. I think the big story in corn and milo is that milo is 91 cents higher than corn. And that's because China's come in the market and bought milo.
What about soybeans?
Soybean prices are also higher. We've had about a 50-cent increase in beans. That soybean November contract broke the $9 resistance level. I think that's significant. You look at beans, I think their target on that contract's about $9.40, so a little higher price is expected in beans right now. Of course, it's all going to be dependent upon China.
Last but not least, how is cotton looking?
Cotton since April has just had a steady upward trend. Cotton prices on that futures contract has went from 51 cents to 66 cents. It broke that 65-cent resistance point. It possibly could go up to 68 or 69 cents. Of course, we're not selling cotton right now on that forward contract into harvest, but it still looks good.
Okay, Dr. Kim Anderson, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week. We're joined now by Roger Saws, our extension specialist, to talk about land values in Oklahoma. Roger, it's been an extraordinary year so far. How have land values fared given all of the challenges that we've seen economically in Oklahoma?
Yeah, well, despite all the challenges that we've seen in production agriculture, I think land values have been extremely resilient. Reports by the USDA and also the Kansas City Fed have shown some modest increases in those land prices going into 2020. And then our very own OSU survey, those results also revealed some fairly marginal increases in pasture ground and cropland for Oklahoma. So I think overall we're in pretty good shape and we're holding our own.
Great. In terms of what the rest of the year may look like, how can we use that information that you have in terms of any planning that needs to happen for producers?
Well, you know, where the markets are headed is sort of like a mixed bag, I think, for the rest of 2020. You know, on one side of the coin, we have historically low interest rates that are supporting the market. It helps make farmland more affordable. But then on the other side of the coin, we have, well, some disappointing farm earnings, and that put pressure on some liquidity positions and credit conditions. And so for a number of farmers and ranchers out there, it's difficult to afford a piece of ground given those credit conditions at this time. But I think overall, I think they'll sort of offset each other, the factors that are supporting the markets and the factors that are pressuring the markets. And so I think the markets will be moving mostly sideways and hold stable and hold steady for the remainder of 2020.
We're just talking about this for a couple of minutes today, but there is a wealth of information for those who want to learn more, right?
Right. There's our very own OSU land value website. And then in addition to that, there's the USDA and also the Kansas City Fed.
Great. Thanks a lot, Roger. And for links to those websites that Roger mentioned, go to sunup.okstate.edu. That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime on our website, sunup.okstate.edu, and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.